To accurately quote a UL 508A industrial control panel, you've got to move past the labor plus parts method. You also need to account for risk, compliance, and engineering. Now, a lot of you are going to throw in the comments that I don't start talking about the actual quoting process until like 5 to 10 minutes into this video. But trust me, what I'm going to talk about first is going to be the difference between you making a profit on your control panel and your company going bankrupt. My name is Tim, and I have spent 30 plus years really building control panels and trading people up in this. And I don't know that underquoting hasn't caused more people to go under or just throw in the towel than anything else. Number one, start tracking everything that you're doing. And you don't need any exotic software to do this. Get you a spreadsheet and just start writing out how long it takes to do things. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, well, wait, I'm here because I don't have any experience doing this. Unfortunately, you are going to need some lessons from the College of Hard Knocks probably early on. You're going to estimate to the best of your ability. And unfortunately, most of you are going to estimate on the low side because you are thinking that it takes a lot less time on most things than it actually does to accomplish it. So start tracking. How long does it take you to strip a wire, ferrule a wire, put a wire label on, land it on terminal? You'll be surprised how much more time it takes than you expect. Now, I'm not saying do every single wire, wire a panel, then count up how many wires it was. All right. It took you 90 minutes and you have X amount of wires in it. Do the math and just figure it out and note that. And you're going to start seeing a pattern. And, I know a lot of you are going to be like, well, can't you just tell me how long it takes? It takes different amounts of time for different people. If you're starting out, then it's going to take you a lot longer. And, as you get more experience, then you'll be able to go faster. Now, honestly, I'm kind of on the tail end of this now as my hands don't work as well. So I'm starting to slow back down. So everybody's time is going to be different on this. But start tracking it, start building you a database. That way you have that information. Just walking along through our process, even though now we build mostly PLC trainers, it's not that much different than control panels. This room right here may be the room that most of you do not account for at all in your quote. As parts come in, you got to unbox the parts. You've got to process the parts. We got all these wires here. They all need cut. They all need prep. There's all these little things that you're like, well, that doesn't take much time. And this little thing, it doesn't take much time. And this little thing, it doesn't take much time. This room right here, which arguably has nothing in it but prep, takes about half the time it does to build a PLC trader. And as you start tracking yours, you're going to find that you're in a similar situation. Don't just think that any wire would take the same amount of time. All of these wires here, they're going into wire duct. You'd be surprised how much time wire duct will save you compared to a door or say the back of this trainer where everything's got to be neat and in a very straight line. This takes a tremendous amount of more time. Think about how long it's going to take you to fix your mistakes because no, you will not wire it perfectly. So if we're in this wire duct and I need to add a wire, it's not a big deal. You stick another wire in the wire duct. Right now you're seeing we left 2 wires out of this door. So in the end, we're going to have to cut every one of these off. We're going to have to get that line perfectly down through there. And that takes time. And you have to account for that. You can't be like, well, I mean, that's my mistake. It's on me. No, you're going to make mistakes. That's got to be part of your time quote. Now, number 2 is really important, especially as you start building up your customer clientele. Initially, you need work. And yeah, any work may be good work. But eventually, we really want to start gauging, is the job a good fit for us? Is the customer a good fit for us? So first of all, are you even capable of building that control panel? And this doesn't necessarily go to your experience level or anything like that. In the case of my panel building shop, it was very narrow. We did not have a very wide shop. It was only like 12 foot wide. And so we just were not set up for big panels. I'll always joke, my buddy Jeff Kuiper over at Full Circle Automation, he built lots of big double door, triple door type panels. And he would always joke, if it only has one door on it, it's a junction box. I almost built no double door panels. In fact, I was trying to figure it out I mean, I built thousands of panels, and I can only recall 5 double door panels that I ever built. So sometimes it could be facility space. It could be your capabilities also, though. It could be, which panels do you enjoy doing? Are you good at doing? Now, another big one is, does the specification call for it to be a UL 508A industrial control panel? A lot of you I know are starting out. Your aim should be to become a UL 508A industrial control panel manufacturer. We'll talk about that later in this video. But if it requires a UL sticker, don't act like you have one. If you don't have one, it will come back to bite you. Do you have the tools that are required? Most people, even that come into my training, are shocked to find out every single terminal in a control panel, a screw terminal, has to be torqued. Every single torque wrench, torque screwdriver, all those things have to be calibrated. Do you have those tools? In some cases, some panels required a high pot test, and I didn't have the equipment to do that. So it's not even a matter of, sometimes it's like, it's not that you gain it over time. Also, it's like, nah, I'm not really into that type of panel. So I couldn't do that one. Now, if you decide that this panel is not for you, let's talk about a very important thing that was really costly for me when I was starting out. And it's one that I've just always thought about, that this was one time I should have done so much better, is if this control panel is not for you, go and tell the customer. Be honest with them. Explain to them the why. I had a job to quote, and really, it was interesting. I probably could have saved that company a lot of money. I probably would have gotten that job. Is I was not comfortable with what they were asking me to do. I was like, I don't think this is going to work, but I didn't have the confidence yet to tell them, folks, this ain't going to work. Well, somebody else came in and did the thing. Well, guess what, folks? It didn't work. And so it would be years later, I've been back in that plant, and then they asked, well, why didn't you ever quit that job? I was like, well, I didn't think it was going to work. And I didn't want to upset you. They're like, we wish you would have told us that. That thing never worked. So be honest with them. Tell them the why and why you can't do it. Because if you're honest with them, one, they're going to know more of your capabilities then. They're going to be able to point jobs that you are capable of doing your way. The other thing is refer them to someone. Oh, I don't want to give somebody else my work. You're not getting the job. Go ahead and refer them to one of your competitors. First of all, your competitor is going to be floored. They're going to be like, what? Did you just refer us work? And I've done this before. They're like, is there a catch? I'm like, no, there's no catch. It's just not in my wheelhouse. And so now your competitor, they're going to remember that. But also the customer's going to remember that. Okay, well, go ahead and send it to him. He referred us to this last time. Let's see if he can do this one. So definitely tell the customer the why of why you can't do it. Keep that relationship going. Now, the next real challenge is, what type of quote are you going to do for them? There's two major ones. You have a fixed price and you have time and material. Now, when you're starting out, time and material is not necessarily a bad thing. Chances are you are cash poor when you're starting out. And so that can kind of be a way where you can kind of keep your expenses. You can kind of keep rolling bills into them and kind of keeping the cash going. And since you don't have a lot of experience with quoting, that can kind of help you cover some of those gaps. Now I say that's only for the beginners, but there were a lot of times there was a job that was just super great in scope. And I was like, man, I can't, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how this one's going to work out. I think this one's going to have to be time and material. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what I would say is, as soon as possible, you want to try to transition to some type of fixed price quoting. And there are a couple hybrid methods on that too, to kind of help cover, some of those gray areas. But first of all, you're going to be giving the customer an idea of what it's going to cost. That's a big value to them. The other thing, as you start building your business and you start quoting work, that's going to let you know how much work do you have in the pipeline. Oh, I don't have a lot of quotes. I need to get out there and probably beat the push a little bit, try to find some people. Oh, now I got way too many quotes. I don't need to focus on that. I probably need to focus on maybe reflowing some items in my shop, trying to smooth things out, add some efficiency. It's going to help you gauge your workload. Now, I mentioned that hybrid approach, and this is probably the one that a lot of you should be doing. Is a lot of times it's like, okay, I know the scope to this point, and then there's a little bit of gray area out here. And a really good example, we did a lot of installations on greenfield sites where it was like, okay, I know you need this panel. You've given me all the specs for this. I've seen the drawings, but okay, when I get out on site, I know that it's going to take this much time probably to land my wires. And after that, you've got some engineering that you're not sure about. So that part will be time and material. So I quote, this is the panel. This is the installation. This is going to get us the power up. And then everything else is time and material as we, modify, we make changes to it. One really important thing, if you're doing that model, is make sure there's a really clear defining point between when that quote ends and when that time and material begins. Because that was even in a lot of my later ones, that was still a struggle. We'd quote a panel and I'd give 2 days startup assistance. Well, first of all, they always get me out there a day too early, which I learned to build in. And this is why I'm saying track everything. You'll learn to build these things in. I put 2 days of startup assistance, but I'd actually price 3 days because I knew when I got there, they weren't going to be ready. So they gave me time to kind of scope the lay of the land out a little bit, see what I might need the next day here in, look for little issues like that. And I knew the next day they'd probably be ready for me. But even then, okay, I do those 2 days and then we're into that gray area. Okay, is some of it on me? Did I forget some things? Is some of it on them? So there was always a little bit of gray area there. And I was probably more on the side of not, there's some people out there that every single change is an engineering change, every single hour is addition. I had a lot of that more built into mine. My panels were not the cheapest, but I didn't have a lot of back charges on those panels. So know that in your quote, you need to define kind of that, that line where all of a sudden you're going to start charging and let them know right away. Be like, hey man, my time is up on what I had quoted from here. So, from here on out, I'm going to be charging for some of this, and they're not going to be like, oh, well, go away. No, they still need you. You just need to communicate with them. Now, number 4 is important. I kind of hit it to it before, but what certifications are required to this job? Do they require that you be a UL 508 industrial control panel manufacturer? And here is an important tip, folks. If you are not a UL 508A industrial control panel manufacturer, you still need to build to UL 508A specs. There is no reason not to. I mean, this specification is pretty much written to keep from burning a plant down. Why wouldn't we do it? Now, depending on the spec of the job, you may be provided drawings or they may be expecting you to provide drawings. So let's talk about, very important, if you are provided jobs, you still have to review those drawings. If it has professional engineering stamp, you still have to review those drawings. And in hindsight of us building panels, I probably found more issues on stamped drawings. That means you've got an engineer that has taken the test and especially a PE. I found way more errors on their drawings than I ever found on non-stamped drawings. And I just can't stress to you that just because it has a stamp doesn't mean you're off the hook. You build that panel, the liability is on you. You'll be surprised when there's an issue, how quickly that engineer will disappear on you. Next, let's talk about components, because most of you will only account for your major components starting out. You're going to know you need a PLC. You're going to know you need an input module. Chances are you're going to find out that you underestimated how many IOs you're going to need. So you're going to need a second input module. You'll know you need a power supply. You'll know you need a drive. Here's where all of a sudden, you're not going to think about this relay. You're not going to think about these little safeties. You're not going to think about the need for terminal blocks. Similarly on this trainer, we're going to think about the big items. This has a robot on it. It needed to pick up some IO link. We got a vision system over here. So we're going to remember, oh yeah, we need a robot controller. We're probably going to remember that we need some IO. We're going to remember the main breaker, some power supply, maybe some circuit protection. But then, we're going to have things that we forget. For example, does your robot need a different voltage? Do you have to have a transformer? What do we got to have safety-wise? And then, most often overlooked is things like these terminal blocks here. And even in the series where we built this trainer out, I left out this field wiring. And really, these type of items are the ones that, they get costly in the field because, I was accounting for everything else. And I got down here and all of a sudden I realized, oh man, I don't have any way to really cleanly land this. One, for the installation, but also for later troubleshooting. And those are the items that start to come back to haunt us. We are going to talk about that in a later video. But think about your field wiring, especially if you're not the one installing it. I see too many of you out there like, the panel looked good. And then the electricians came in and they destroyed it. No, they didn't. You did not give them a way to do the field wire, so they made a way. So there's several different, ways that people do the actual material. For me, I did mainly account for the major components. I get the PLC, I get the power distribution, kind of those big costly items. I did not itemize down to the terminal block though. So what I did is again, track your data. And I found out on average in my panels, your wire duct, your DIN rail, your terminal blocks, your screws, all those things that we don't think about, averaged about 8 to 10% of my panel cost. So I take the major components and then I added 10% onto them for accessories. Sometimes I did win on that. Sometimes I did lose on that. But what I found was the time it took to itemize down to the nth degree on those items wasn't worth it to me. Now, some people, they do itemize down to the nth degree. And for me, I didn't have enough time, when we were quoting, because, once we're into the design phase up to it, it's a whole different story. But when we're just quoting, when it's kind of, a little gray whether we're going to get out there, we got to watch how much time we actually put into it. But after we take our major parts and then we add that 10%, we're going to take that total and we're going to mark it up. Now, standard markups in the industry are somewhere in the 25 to 35% range. And there's a couple important reasons why. First of all, you are not a bank. But there is a cost associated with you carrying that money. Well, I'm only going to be carrying it for 60 days. Well, go to the bank and ask them how much it costs you to get a loan for 60 days. You should charge the same amount or if not more, that a bank would charge. Also, you're going to have debt, DOAs, debt on arrival items. It happens. And so you've got to deal with that. So there's a cost associated with all those things. So take that, mark it up, make sure that you understand the difference between markup and profit margin. They are two different things. That's getting more into a business type YouTube channel. That's not exactly what we do here. Now, once you've done your parts cost and you've marked that up, now we need to talk about an hourly rate. And that is going to be significantly variable to your particular organization. And I think a lot of you starting out are going to look what maybe I charge per hour, or what your big shop competitor around you charges per hour, and be like, well, that's just highway robbery. They're charging them way too much. We got to start thinking about what is our overhead. How much does your software cost? I mean, in this room, you would be surprised how ridiculous this software cost is. It just say this is a ridiculous amount of money. Well, something's got to cover that ridiculous amount of money. How much is your insurance? How much is your benefits? How much is your unemployment? How much is your shop rent? How much is your cost of your truck? How much is your utility cost? How much does your tools cost? How much does it cost to get them calibrated? But we've got to account for all that overhead. And for some of you that are thinking about UL, you need to account for that. I mean, you've got to be pricing your jobs for growth into this industry. If you're just pricing it to put food on the table, then you might as well just go get a job somewhere and put food on the table. There's nothing wrong with that. But, UL, and it's been a couple of years since I actually have a video. It's in the description on UL costs. I think it was around $6,000. Let's say it's $7,000 now. I'm just throwing it out there. Let's say it's $7,000 for your first year. Then you've got to take that into account for your panel. So are you only building 10 panels a year? You take that number and you divide it by 10. Now, I know some people will be like, well, we charge this much for a bigger panel and this much for a smaller. No, I charged a flat fee. Now, we did enough volume. It wasn't a huge deal, so we were doing more than 10 panels. So maybe it was, I don't know, maybe it was $50 per panel. But you've got to take all those into account. And then you got to figure out, what do you want to make? So take your cost and mainly make sure your units are the same. I don't care if you do this overhead costs per year, overhead costs per month, whatever. Make sure units are the same. It's, units can get important when we're talking dollars and cents. But take all that overhead costs, let's say per year, and then take what you want to make per year. And now we need to start thinking through some of those incidental costs. And you can call that warranty, you can call it whatever you want, but there are going to be certain costs that you cannot charge back to the customer, but you cannot anticipate. If a part does die, even if it's not your fault, you've got to go out there and change that part. You've got to get that part next day aired in to get the customer back going. You may have to get on a plane and fly and go it. So for that, I would be in the 10 to 15% range. Now, we're not done yet, because really, that arguably just gets us to working a regular job. Now you got to decide, what profit do you want to make on your labor? And, that's going to be, again, very dependent on you and where you're at. But I would say that should be somewhere in the 10 to 20% range. All right, now let's talk about one other thing, because different companies do this different ways. Some people have a tiered rate, and some people just have a fixed, this is my cost rate. And so on the tiered rates, some people will say, well, this is how much I, charge for a technician to go out. This is how much I charge for a helper to go out. This is how much I charge when someone's building a panel. This is how much I charge when someone's designing a panel. And I guess if you have a lot of employees, that can work well. But I want to talk to you, a lot of you that are probably one or two people, is in the end, there's only one or two of you. So should you be charging a different rate for what you're doing? Or is it pretty much, this is me and this is what I'm going to charge? So really, as I get further along, I did a lot more of just kind of flat rate charges on a lot of that. But you may have to juggle that or figure out which one works best for you. Now, let's talk about a couple hidden costs that get us a lot of times. Is first of all, and this is something, well, I shouldn't say it's new now. At least for the last decade, most people are asking for it, is an SCCR, short circuit current rate. And we do have a video on how to calculate it down in the description. But you need to put a short circuit current rating on your panel. Now, here's where this can get tricky, is in the specs that you quoted, I'm seeing a lot more people asking for an SCCR rating. So used to, really, it was put an SCCR rating on the panel. Well, if you don't know, long story short, that is how much explosion can happen if something shorts out. How much danger are we putting someone into? And so the difference safety-wise between a 5 kiloamp SCCR rating and a 65 kiloamp SCCR rating is tremendous. So there's a lot more panels out there that are saying we want a 50 kiloamp SCCR rating. Now, going back to our quote, and I probably should have included this earlier, is if someone specifies a 5 kiloamp SCCR or 50 kiloamp SCCR rating, and you quote parts that are only good for a 5, you're going to be surprised how much that cost is going to be to get it to that 50 kiloamp rating. I mean, realistically, I mean, you could easily be in, on the circuit protection side, you could be in the realm of 2 or 3 times more cost. So make sure you're paying attention to that. Make sure you're putting it on your panel. And this is important. Provide drawings for that control panel. Too many are like, well, they didn't ask for drawings. That's not in my quote. No, if you build a control panel, you need to provide drawings for that control panel. Quit putting electricians in danger going into panels without any drawing. That is a moral responsibility that you need to do. Now, a couple of other places that we end up losing out in the assembly is forgetting about the time that it actually takes to bolt an item down. We got to drill the hole. We got to tap the hole. We got to have screws to put in the hole. We got to torque the screws, all those little things. Don't forget about those. And here's where, don't go off of vibes. Let's go off of data. So as you're building the panel, once you have your panel layout done, start a stopwatch or write your time down, the clock on your phone. And then once you're done drilling and tapping all those, write that time down, count up how many holes you did. Start learning how much time it actually takes. We grossly underestimate how long and how much it costs to land a wire. A lot of, someone the other day, they're like, well, it's only 3 foot of wire, can't cost more than 10 cents. I'm like, are you serious? I mean, the ferrules on the end of the wire cost more than that. But think about how long does it take to strip a wire? How long does it take to put the ferrule on the wire? That wire label, it's $1 per wire if you're using the labels we use. And I really like the labels we're using. They're really clean. They last a long time. And again, I'm building panels now for longevity. And we're going to talk about longevity of panels in a later video. But you are going to be shocked how long, on average, it takes you to process a wire. Time it. Now, the other thing is make sure, one, you block off time, but also you block in your quote the time to actually do quality control testing on your panel. Do not put a panel together, think, it looks good, and ship that thing out the door. Every panel that you build should be powered up. Now, a lot of you are like, well, I don't have 480. First of all, we have step-up transformers. We can get to 480 and we can power our controls up. Oh, I don't have 3-phase. We have rotary phase converters. We can power up our panels. We can test. And yeah, there are videos on all that in the description. But you need to power them up. You need to test the I/O points. You'll be surprised the commons, and no pun intended, the common is the most commonly overlooked thing on a control panel, and it's a lot easier to fix that at your shop than once the thing's out in the field, especially if you weren't planning to go on the installation. Now, once it's built, take a picture of the panel. Make detailed pictures of every single panel that goes out your door, because you'll be surprised at times that you make a customer happy and they want another one. And really, that was an issue early on in my panel building that it probably hasn't occurred to you yet, but I built a panel, it functions, I'm happy, I get paid, woohoo. Then the customer's like, hey, I want another one. And when they get the next one, it doesn't look exactly like what they bought the first time. Maybe it's something simple like I used a piece of 2-inch wire duct one time, I used a piece of 3-inch wire duct the next time. But from their perspective, they're like, no, I wanted the exact same panel. Maybe they're selling it to their customer. And then their customer's looking at it being like, well, this doesn't look exactly the same. And so take a picture of every one. Also, and y'all may be here because y'all found one of them. I did a video showing the functionality of every panel before it shipped. And you'd be surprised how many issues that solved. Just the customer understanding what they're getting, the installer understanding what they're doing. I mean, I can't tell you the times that the installer came back before the panel shipped and said, hey, I know you built that thing for 240, but we're getting 480 into here. That's a big one to make sure that you cover before it gets there. Another one is, I had one that I just missed the mark. I mean, we just had a very terrible communications lineup issue. That customer is like, Tim, this is not what I asked for. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad I didn't ship that panel, but I was able to fix it. Now there's all that's so much easier to do on in your shop than once you're on site. That's what we want to do. We want to make sure that panel is right before it actually gets on site. But yeah, also you want to take the pictures because hopefully you start advertising your work and that's going to help you get more work. Now, one other thing on our quote. And so first of all, as pretty soon after you get going, hire a lawyer to put some terms and conditions on your quotes because I got to be honest, I've never needed the terms and conditions, but it's kind of like insurance. Probably ought to have it. But the big things I see on quotes that are missing is, first of all, since I just mentioned it, that voltage. Make sure your quote tells them what voltage you're providing because, yeah, you'll be surprised the times they come back and they're like, nope, we don't have that voltage. Make sure your quote has a expiration date because, they kick that can down the road for 6 months. Well, especially right now, how much have prices gone up from 6 months ago? You don't want to just eat that call. So for me, my quotes are good for 30 days. Sometimes I'd have somebody like, hey, we're only, this one's going to be 90. Well, I'd have to put some money in there just in case. And they understand that. The other thing is put terms in your quote. Do not just put that, hey, this is going to cost $20,000, net 30. No, you are not a bank. And this is important. And vendors, if you're sitting here, I'm sorry, you are a vendor probably. Customers, if you're sitting here watching this video and trying to understand the why this stuff costs so much or why they want why do they need this money up front? This is probably more important for you than it actually is for the panel builder. Is if we provide them no money up front and they're footing the bill for all of those costs, buying the parts and paying the labor until it's done, their mind's only half on building you a quality system. The rest of their mind is on how are they going to cover their costs, and you're going to have a crappier system. And I can't tell you early on the times that I made too many decisions based on my cash situation instead of what was best for the customer. So in my case, there's a couple different ways. A lot of them you'll see like a 30-30-30-10. Honestly, I feel that's a little too much breakup, but people would be like 30% on receipt of order, 30% on design approval, and then 30% on delivery, and then 10% maybe 30 days later just to deal with stuff. That's one. Mine was a 60-30-10. So 60% on receipt of order. And really that gets me through ordering my parts and giving me the time to make sure I'm designing a really good control panel that's going to do exactly what they want. And then I would have 30% on the completion of the job, and then 10% for them if they wanted some type of incidentals. Now, honestly, even then, it was actually usually a 60-40. I would usually do 60 up front, and then I would ship the panel, we'd install it, and I would build them the 40. And I never had an issue with any of that. Now, one other to look out for, panel builders, is those customers that are net 90, and they push out to 120, and they push out to 180. First of all, they are leeches. Now, you may need some leeches to start with, but you want to get rid of those customers as soon as possible. But there is a cost to holding that money, or them being able to hold that money. And here's where, there's a lot of MBAs out there, as controllers that think that they are making their company cash rich by holding on to that money longer. Well, no. If I know it's a net, well, first of all, if somebody comes up to me today, now you may not be able to do this yet, but if they were to come to me today and say, hey, we're net 90, you're okay with that? I'll be like, no, deal upon receipt. Now, if they say they're net 30, I go to AM. Don't forget about women's intuition. You guys that are running husband and wife companies, I go to Amber and say, hey, do we want to get these folks net 30? And I don't even know what her side says. Sometimes she says yes, sometimes she says no, and I follow it, and that's never That's never come back to haunt me. But if they are a long, slow pay customer, add money in there for that. I mean, I had some customers and I did, and they even told me to. And it was funny. They were the ones that taught me this. They're like, yeah, we're net 90. Go ahead and add to it to cover your cost. And yeah, because really, in the end, the last thing you want to be doing is having half your mind on where's the money coming from and the other half on the actual job. You need to be able to be 100% focused on putting out the best control panel you can. Just off the top of my head, a couple other items is it's becoming more and more that you need to put the short circuit current rating on your quote. And do you have the right to substitute parts? This is very important, especially y'all. A few years ago, we had some severe part shortages. And I'd get some engineered stamped drawings. Now, once that drawing has a stamp on it, arguably you cannot change it. And so I'd be like, hey, the part you have spec'd here, it's got an 8-month delivery. Do you want to wait 8 months on this? What do you want to do? But make sure that's clear whether you have the right to substitute or whether you're going to be right by what they're saying. But yeah, probably next we should talk about what is the difference between a lowest bidder panel versus one built for longevity. I'll have to brainstorm a little bit on that one, but check out that link in the description and hit that subscribe button. That way you know when it comes out.